Welcome to Bikes and Snacks. Last week, I posted a video about how to fix a flat tire. The intro to that video was a B-roll style clip, but since we're still in a pandemic, I filmed it by myself. Just me and the camera. Here's the clip with some of the edits peeled away. I hope that was as fun to watch as it was to make for you. I spent most of the last few months watching pretty amazing YouTube clips from Daniel Schiffer, Peter Lindgren, Alex Gasay, and James Matthews. And I wanted to make something that I envisioned they would make if they were filming a fixing a flat video with no outside help. Since I'm copying them, I figured I should copy the thing that they do best, which is to give you some insight into how it's made. I've chosen to break down 3 parts of the clip that required some problem solving. As a heads up, I used Final Cut Pro, but the editing is pretty basic, and the problem solving is mostly a matter of filming. Most solo B-roll of a person is either shot point of view, held by one hand, or mounted on a tripod. The problem is that the audience gets bored if they're shown the same type of shot over and over again. I wanted to include shots with the camera in motion, but I needed my hands free since I was doing the action on screen. In the opening shot, I wanted you to feel really involved and close to the action, so I shot it with Sony's 90mm macro lens. Unfortunately, that meant that framing was very difficult. I used a motorized setup from Edelchrome that allowed me to film hands-free. I could program the rig to pan on 2 axes, tilt and change levels, but the system doesn't track a subject the way a human camera operator does. So keeping my finger in frame and in focus was really difficult. I started by trying to watch the monitor, but my brain couldn't accurately control my finger when I was looking through the camera's point of view. In the end, I shot the scene over and over again until I learned what speed I had to move at. I wanted to establish the scene by showing a bigger part of the bike. But the timing with the music didn't work out, so I incorporated the establishing shot into the stem. I layered the shots together and reduced the opacity of the top layer so it looked like a reflection. I know it doesn't make sense for the bike to be reflected on itself, but it's just a silly video about changing a flat tire. And quite honestly, it looks kinda cool. I added a mask effect so the reflection only appears on the stem. And of course, the mask transforms as the shot moves, which sells the illusion. I adjusted the speed to emphasize the finger being tracked. I wanted to build some tension and draw you inside the scene. The last thing I added was motion blur. The motorized pan and jib devices I have move slowly, so for most of the dynamic shots, I just moved in real-time slow motion, which is great for keeping things in frame. Once it was time to edit, I just sped up the shots to make things seem more natural. But because I was moving so slowly, there was no motion blur. To add motion blur, you just drag and drop like this. I've included a link down below to the motion blur I've used here. It was less than $5 and totally worth it. Here's a side-by-side with the motion blur on the right. As you can see, it makes quite a difference. The final touch was sound design. The sound effects I added increase in intensity along with the song as the tension rises. I wanted you to know something big is happening next. The second shot I'm going to break down is that big thing, which is the front wheel being ejected into oblivion. So here was the challenge. I had to suspend the bike in the air as high as I could, but I still had to be able to control the release of the front wheel and have it all low enough to film overhead, but I also needed to have it high enough to have clearance underneath so it would appear empty looking down. To get the bike high in the air, I took a regular 2-level bike stand and rearranged its arms so it would hold the bike high and away from the stand. I pointed my lighting upwards to keep the floor dark, and then backlit the handlebars to make sure the bike separated itself from the shadows. I mounted the camera on a jib to my tripod, fully extended, and placed it on a table. I'm filming with the Sony a7S III, which can shoot up to 240 frames per second, so I can slow things down to 10% speed. After doing a couple of test drops, the footage looked boring. At first, the wheel didn't have far enough to fall when it dropped straight down, so I tied one of the spokes to some black sewing thread, then taped the thread to a light stand. This caused the wheel to tilt and flatten as it fell out. On the floor, I had a couple of couch cushions wrapped in black cloth to catch the wheel perfectly. The final shot I'm going to talk about was actually the easiest to shoot. Here, a CO2 pump swipes across the screen accompanied by a mask to transition away from the tire being reseated to the rim. The pump is then caught midair, then deployed. The sequence is a little over 4 seconds long, but requires 4 clips and a lot of frame-by-frame massaging in post. Getting the CO2 pump to fly across the screen and then get caught was based on 2 video tutorials by Daniel Schiffer. I balanced the pump on a rotating turntable that was in front of some green paper. Since the metal pump picks up a lot of reflections, I kept it as far away from the green screen as possible. Also, I didn't want any soft blurry edges, so I stopped down to f5. In Final Cut Pro, I took the green screen clip and added the keyer effect, which melts the green away. But the cylinder the pump is balancing on stayed, of course, so I applied a mask effect to it. To give the spinning pump the illusion of falling away, I keyframed a change in its size. Next, I used the transition tool to add in rotation and movement to sell the illusion of the pump falling. The last tweak I added was motion blur. Here, I've arranged the pump clip side by side with motion blur added and without it. I wanted this clip to be a seamless bridge between the action of reseating the tire and inflating the tube. This is where we apply the mask to make the transition. I layered the beginning of the pump clip over the end of the tire clip. Next, I pulled out the mask tool and added a mask over the portion of the pump clip where the pump wipes over the frame. Now it appears as though the pump wipes the first image away as it spins across the screen. To get the pump to fall into my hand, I filmed a third clip with my hand holding the pump and moving towards the wheel to inflate the tube. In the beginning of the clip, I positioned my hand holding the pump in a way that matched the last frame of the pump falling. I then removed the last frame of the pump flying. I did this because a true match cut doesn't work. Our eyes and brains are anticipating movements. Unfortunately, once the two clips were lined up, I thought the hand movement after the catch looked odd because it was immediately moving in a different direction. So I took a freeze frame of the pump in hand, then used the transform tool to animate the still image for a few frames. I also masked out the wheel until I was ready to show it so there would be a feeling of greater space between the shots. Next, I adjusted the exposure and the color on the flying pump clip to match the pump in hand, which was easier than the other way around because the skin on my hand would have started to look very weird. Finally, I added sound effects, which makes the catch more believable. Well, that's it for today. I'll leave you with the final clip in its entirety. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and slap the like button if you're feeling generous today. And I'll see you on the road.